Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thanks for joining me again for another episode of the podcast, and it is always my goal to share enlightening conversation, commentary on issues that are impacting the Black community specifically, and whether you are in the Black community on the East Coast, whether you're in the Black community on the West Coast, whether you're in the Northeast, the Southeast, the Southwest, the Northwest, we find issues in our communities that are similar. And many of these issues are similar because the self-hatred that we have is very, very similar. The oppression that we face in different areas of the country that has been persistent for many years, that has a similar touch. And we have a very shared history here in this country. And so we put all of that together, and whether you're in Detroit, whether you're in Compton, whether you're in, Dallas, Texas, we find a lot of commonalities with each other. And so that's why it's easy to have a broad-reaching message. And so that is my goal, to produce a broad-reaching message that can be applicable and relevant wherever you are in this country or abroad. And certainly, when we are witnessing the protests that are happening in this country, specifically against police brutality, then we see those in Europe who are also protesting police brutality. We see there's protests all the way in Palestine about state-sanctioned brutality. It's happening in France. It's happening in England, and so many of our issues amongst the Black and the brown folks are very, very similar, and so we need messaging that can be useful, that can be productive, so that we can course correct and improve the outcomes where we are. And in this episode, I want to talk about, the 3 top businesses that we should be investing in the Black community. The top 3 businesses. Now, seems to be quite a boom in entrepreneurship and an entrepreneurial spirit amongst, Black people in this country. Women, men, millennials, and there doesn't appear to be any industry where entrepreneurial interest isn't being shown. And there's so much innovation, and so much of what I am seeing is so wonderful. And I'm excited that we are thinking about ways that we can, if not necessarily cut the cords or cut the ties to our employers, but at least have an opportunity to bring in income that is not just dependent on our employers. And as we are seeing, with the country, having this historic impact from the COVID-19 pandemic, and with the economy suffering the way it is, we know that, employers just can't keep people, on the payrolls, unfortunately. And so many are thinking about, how can I establish some kind of steady source of income, and whether it's to replace or to be something supplemental. And there's industries such as skin, hair, and nails. There's innovations in technology. There's innovations with and entrepreneurial interest with video and photography. And I think that is good. And I'm glad that we have the mindset to be one's own boss, um, and to create jobs for others, because that's appropriate to um, be functional enough so that you or I can provide a service that others can consume in exchange for, in exchange for money, or providing goods in exchange for money. But I think the three of the top businesses that we should invest in the Black community are family, education, and remembrance of God, whether that's church, temple, or mosque. So I'll repeat that. In my opinion, the three top businesses that we should invest in the Black community is family, education, and remembrance of God. And I'll add that these may be the three top neglected um, investments, or three areas that are most neglected in the Black community. When we think about family, and family is a business, raising children, coming together, a father and a mother, a husband and a wife, and, put their efforts into rearing children. It is, I said this recently, that, parenting is not passive work. Parenting is not something that we do on cruise control. Parenting is like a full court press, raising children so that they can at one point become adults who can be self-sufficient, who can care for themselves independently. That is the goal that we should have for our children, where they can learn all that we have to teach them, learn what they need to educationally, and then go out into the world and function as responsible and productive members of society. And we know that the statistics tell us that most children born in the Black community are not born in a family. And so we have to think about the impact that puts on a community, the impact that puts not just on the child, but on a community when children are not born into families. There is something very necessary about the family structure, about the dynamics of having a mother and a father in the home to raise the children, right? So when we are talking about the delinquency, the crime, the incarceration rates, when we look at these young people who are coming into family court, and I've been in family court, when we're looking at these young people and we're doing the tally, these young people do not have fathers in the home. These young people may not know their fathers. These young people may have fathers who are incarcerated. These young people might not be raised with their mothers. They may be being raised by grandmothers or aunts or grandfathers. Our family unit has been so shredded in the Black community that when a young woman, a young girl, is pregnant with a child, the thought that we have about, are you going to get married? That's something that's not even of conversation for us anymore, and we've almost made it acceptable that we don't encourage our children to produce children in a marriage. That isn't popular for us anymore, and that's something that many think is antiquated or is a relic of the past. But when we are looking at the disorder and the dysfunction of our communities, and we contrast that with this trend of fatherless children being born to young mothers, we have to recognize that there is a problem. We are not investing in our families. And that is, for a child to grow up and to be whole, if you needed the sperm and the egg to produce the child, well, you need the male and the female and the feminine and the masculine contribution to raise a child. And we really neglect this area of our social construct in the Black community, that area of family. And it's not just the father and the father being absent and having fatherless homes or children who are born out of wedlock. That is definitely an issue. But even having extended family present who are functional adults who can support that family, who can support that household. Because in the society that we're living in, you know, for most of us, we need, if there's a father and a mother in the home, we need these parents out there working, because we don't have the same economic conditions that may have been present 80 years ago, 60 years ago, where or 50 years ago, where a man could go and work in a factory and his wife stay home and raise the children until they're of a certain age. Maybe it's kindergarten. And then, once she has that last child in kindergarten, then she can go work part-time, or maybe she can go work in a cafeteria or start her career somewhat later. Now, the way the economic structure is, both parents are out there trying to, make a way financially for children. So when we have children whose parents are out working, then we do need to lean on our extended family. But so much of our family is dysfunctional. And if you're listening to this, just think about, this might not be your family. You might have a functional family, but in our community, we have such dysfunction. So maybe you do have a sister that can babysit your child, but your sister's mindset. If you're a responsible adult, you might not want your daughter or your son around your sister, or you might not want your daughter or your son around your brother, because of the mindset, because of the dysfunction, because of the incompetencies, because they don't have their thing together. We have to really, as a Black community, invest in our families. Our young people are going out into the street looking for family in gangs, looking for family in drug traffickers. And this isn't something that that I'm just making up. This isn't just conjecture that you're getting from me. I'm talking from law enforcement, from the conferences and the meetings that I have with folks who are doing and working hard to do great work for young people in the social services industry. So many of these children have some things in common. These children who are in front of judges, who are delinquent, who are truant, who are not attending schools, who are dropping out, they don't have fathers in their home. They don't have a family structure. Their mother isn't well. She's out there, if she's working, she's out there trying to struggle and make a way for herself and make a way for the children. And so we have neglected this area so much of our lives that our children, because they still have that natural need for family, well, they're going out into the street to find family. Our young women are looking for the attention and affection of men that are older than them because they're looking for a father figure. And so they're vulnerable to these men in the street. Our young men are looking for a father figure. And so they're vulnerable to the big homie, to the OG that's out there in the street that's going to put them in a corner, selling drugs, that's going to initiate them into a gang and into that lifestyle, because family is so necessary. Our young people are coming together themselves and forming, quote, gangs, because they need the community. They need the connection. It is so necessary. So as much as we want to rally talking about Black entrepreneurship and Black businesses, and I see y'all on Facebook and y'all are, doing a lot and making a way for yourself and producing products and producing services, we have to come back home and look at our households and reinvest in family. And we can't neglect to share this with our little cousins, with our sisters, with our nieces, with our granddaughters, with our daughters, with our sons, with our nephews, with the children on our block, the children on our street, the young people that we come across in the youth sports. We have to show them what family is. So if we're going to continue to neglect the family, then we're going to need so many services for to produce or to prevent children from moving into the criminal justice system. And it's awful because they go to school, they find themselves disinterested in the educational system. They find themselves out in the street. They're getting initiated. They graduate to their first arrest. Then they graduate to their first conviction. And now they begin this awful cycle, this degraded cycle of life that the older guys are in. Or the young woman has one child at 14 or 13 and has the second child at 15 or 16. And then she too gets into a cycle, or she too is in a gang, or she's being trafficked, or he's being trafficked. We must reinvest in the family structure in the Black community. It is so, so, so important. And if you were to pay attention to the statistics that we have in our cities regarding those children who are involved in delinquency, who are involved in the criminal justice system, who are most in need of intervention, services, and mentorship, you're going to find that most of them coming from fatherless homes. So there is a connection. There's a connection there to family and to how our communities become disordered. We have to reinvest in our families. And so the second business that we must invest in, the second top business that the Black community must invest in is education. We have to educate our children. We cannot leave it just up to the government, to the school system, to the Board of Education to provide an adequate education for our children. Now let's think about some of the things that we see in the news that are ongoing and that are tragic, right? So one of the things that we talk about is the Black infant mortality rate. We talk about the Black mother mortality rate when she's pregnant or giving birth. We talk about the high rates of high blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease in the Black community. Well, it seems to me that we need doctors. We need Black doctors. We need to invest in the minds of our children so that when you and I are older and we might be faced with a chronic disease, or if our children are faced with a chronic disease, then when we go to the hospital, when we go to the clinic, when we go to the medical facility, we're not being dismissed because we have Black doctors that we invested in, that we educated, that we gave scholarships to, that we supported, so that when the time came where we would have need for medical intervention, that we would have doctors in place to serve us. Same thing whether we want to talk about attorneys. We need to have attorneys that we trust, that we're comfortable with. We must have Black educators. We must invest in educating Black people into teaching. We need more Black men in schools. We need more Black women teaching our children in the school systems. So when the Board of Education or the teacher in the classroom is teaching some crazy convoluted history, and they have your child pretending to be a slave, or they have your child bringing home homework talking about write down the great thing about American slavery, or you hear your children reading textbooks saying that Christopher Columbus discovered America, or you have your children reading textbooks about how wonderful and noble Thomas Jefferson was when you knew that he owned slaves, and the only great thing that you hear your child say about Black people is that Crispus Attucks was the first Black that died in the Revolutionary War fighting for America's freedom. And then from there, we go to Jesse Owens. We go to Muhammad Ali. We go to athletes. We go to a historical figure like Dr. Martin Luther King, who fought so that we can have civil rights, although those civil rights that he fought for are still being denied from us today. We have to educate our children. If we are unhappy with the educational system, structure, and curriculum that America is providing, that the government is providing, well, then we're going to have to take responsibility for the education of our own children. Now, that could be you forming a school. It could be a group of you forming your own school. It could be a group of you forming a weekend school, a Saturday school. That could be you engaging in tutoring programs with the young people in the community. But we have to engage in the business of education for our children. It is so necessary. And, I know that there's questions now about whether our young people will have the opportunity to participate in interscholastic activities, sports. Are they going to be able to have track and field? Are they going to come back for the football season? Are they going to be able to wrestle or play basketball? Well, I see how excited we are when our children are dunking the basketball, when they're running for touchdowns, right? But that should not be the only thing that excites us educationally about our children. I say educationally because these sports programs are provided through the school districts. So I see so many men coming out for the football games, for the basketball games. I see so many men posting about the success of this young athlete or that young athlete, but I do not see men engaging in the education, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, the critical thinking. We don't see that, but we must see that. We have to engage in the business of educating our children. Dunking a basketball is great. And if you were to be, one of millions to be chosen to play in the NBA and to be a big star, that is wonderful. But what about everybody else? Most people will not make it to pro sports. Most people will not make it to the big times, to the big leagues, right? So we have to be as excited about what's happening in the classroom and more excited about what's happening in the classroom than we are what's happening on the basketball court or the football field or the wrestling mat or the track. We have to let our children know that we are interested in how well they're understanding their studies. We have to let them know that we're interested in pushing them academically, in making sure that they have the tutoring and the academic supports that they need, because these are going to be adults, right, that are going to advance past high school. And then once they're out of high school, what have we prepared them for? Do they know how to write a check? Do they know how to balance their bank account? Do they know a skill or a trade? Because everybody isn't going to go to college, but do they know how to do something with their hands so that they can feed themselves, so that they can clothe themselves, so that they can provide shelter for themselves? So in addition to moving on after high school academically, we can also prepare our young people to engage in trades, because I'm going to tell you, the doctor is going to need a plumber, right? And the attorney is going to need a carpenter. So our children must be prepared, and we do that through education. So we, as Black people, have to invest in the business of educating our own children. Because we do not invest in family, because we do not invest in education, we continue to have poor outcomes in our community. And then the last business that we have to invest more in is the remembrance of God. Now, whether you go to church because you're a Christian, whether you're going to the temple, whether you're going to a mosque, whatever your religious affiliation is, we have to remember that the remembrance, and we have to recognize that the remembrance of God is the greatest force in the universe. Now, I know you might say, well, I'm not religious, but you know that there was a creation. You know that everything that we witness in nature was put there by some force and some power. Whatever you define that force and that power by, this is what I'm talking about. There is a force that is the author of creation, science, mathematics, nature, right? And whatever that force, whatever that source of power is, we see creation operating in peace, right? We don't see the moon and the sun arguing with each other about it's my time to shine, right? The planets are not bumping into each other because they were created in peace they're in their own orbital rotation. They're not infringing on one another. They're not in each other's space. They're not in each other's way. So what I'm saying is, as Black people, we have to invest in the business of remembrance of God. Now, I know some folks say that they're spiritual and they don't go to church. And I know that there's such a thing as church hurt. And so we've withdrawn from the institution of church. But we still need community, and we still need to operate as a community. Our challenge has been us taking on the idea of being individualistic and individuals. And what church and mosques and temples can provide for us, it is community, and it is the collective remembrance of creation, of nature, of divinity, whatever it is that you want to call it. Because whatever that source was that created the universe, that source created the universe to operate in peace and with order. And when we fail to remember, if you want to say divine laws of God, whatever it is that you want to frame this conversation in, when we fail to remember, or if we neglect and reject that order and that structure, then we ourselves become disorderly. We ourselves become diseased, right? Because now we are operating out of the order and the peace and the harmony that the source, the creator, God, Yahweh, Allah, whatever it is, the term that you use based on your religion, when we pull away and fail to observe those divine laws and those divine principles, those natural laws, those natural principles, then we find ourselves being disordered. And so we have an entire community, talking about Black people, who are disordered. We are diseased, whether that's physically in our physical health or whether that's mentally in our mental health. It is so great to be part of a community where we all agree that we are striving real hard to operate our lives in the harmony and peace that the Creator, the source of power, the source of nature, that we are working to operate and conduct ourselves in that same order. And we have one another there to remind us of that order, and that we have a community. And the reason why it is so important that we commune together, church, temple, mosque, synagogue, whatever your choice is because those things that we need in life, right? Those other investments like education, you can come together with those people who share your beliefs, who share the intentions that you have for your own personal life. They share them too. You can come together collectively, right? Because sure, you want to educate your children. Where are you going to get these people from that believe like you, that have the same intention as you, right? They might be sitting on the pew next to you in church. They might be sitting in the chair next to you in the temple or in the synagogue, right? And so the same thing with family, right? We want to keep families together. We want to build strong families. We want to remind our children that it is important to have families. So you as an individual can certainly teach your child, but how much more power, talk about a force multiplier, when you have other individuals there with you, with their children, all striving to give that same example to your families. We have been trained to operate in silos. We have been encouraged to be individuals. Now, we don't see too many groups of people who are successful operating as individuals. I'm doing it by myself. And it's interesting because we want to be individuals sometimes because we don't want to be responsible to other people, right? We don't want to be responsible. We only want to be responsible to ourselves. But what I know is that if I'm only going to be responsible to myself and my children, and despite something that I have to share, I'm going to be selfish and keep it to myself. But the sister next to me who has a need, And her children could use what it is that we know, but I'm going to keep it to myself because it's for me and my children. Well, what happens when those children become disorderly? Because I didn't help that woman. I didn't help my neighbor access the same information, resources that I have because I'm an individual. Now, those disorderly children have an influence on my children. Those disorderly children who now may be delinquent in the community, they might see my car and want it. They might want to come in my house and take what I have. We cannot be successful as individuals, not as successful as we can be as a collective and as a community. So I know people who, they're interested. They have a big idea of this business. They might want to start a restaurant, open a restaurant. They might want to start baking and selling things, right? But they don't want to be responsible to a group. They just want to be an individual. Well, where are your first customers going to come from? Because you're an individual. Because you want to be by yourself. Because you don't want to be responsible to other people. But now you want other people to be excited about your venture. You want other people to be excited. Now, you weren't out supporting them, helping them build what it was that was good for them and also good for you. But now when your idea sparks life in you and you want to bring this thing to birth, now you want the community to come support you. You see, we can be so much more successful as a group. Now, that is not to say everybody in church is going to agree and think exactly the same, or everybody in a temple is going to agree or think exactly the same. But the fundamental principles are the same. And so we can operate with one another based on those fundamental principles. And that's why just saying, well, I'm spiritual, I don't do church, I don't do community religion, well, that can hurt us, right? Because now we have a bunch of individuals, but we need a community. We don't all have to go to the same church, the same temple, the same mosque. But I want to know that you're part of a community, that you have support. Because I'm going to say another thing. When these young people are with their parents and they're in front of the judge and the parent is saying, I need services, I need help. Usually it's a single mother. Sometimes it's a grandmother. It could be an aunt, rarely a father there. And this parent or this guardian is pleading for help. I want the judge to say, well, are you part of a church? Are you part of an organization? Do you have other family members that can support you? And I'm going to tell you, so often these people are coming and they're on their own. They're by themselves. They're not tethered to anything. They're not tethered to a community because they're individuals. So we have to plug back into each other. We have to be about the business in the Black community of family, of education, and of remembrance to God, whatever it is you define God as. But we have to be about this business, and we have to do it as a unit, as a collective, and not just as individuals, because we are so much stronger as a collective. So I want to say to you, while we're out and we're out supporting businesses, and it's exciting. I've been to these conferences, these sisters in business conferences, but I want us to be about the business of those issues that matter most. Because sure, I want to be able to buy a sister's product, but I want that sister to also have the opportunity to educate her child in a peaceful and loving and fulfilling environment. I want that sister to be plugged into a community that shares the same principles that she does, because at some point she's going to be in need. And I want my sister to have a community that's going to help her meet her needs. The same way I am part of a community that's going to meet my needs. The same way my children are in a family that's providing them stability. The same way that my community has created a school so that my children can be educated in a loving and fulfilling way. So we have to be about the business of family, of education, and of remembrance to God. And we have to do it collectively if we want to be successful. Sure, the world will give us individual success. In fact, they prefer us to be an individual. But our unity, a wise man said, our unity is more powerful than an atomic bomb. We don't always have to agree. We're not always going to think the same, But if we operate based off of natural and fundamental principles that we observe in nature, then there's so much we can do together. And there's so much further we can go together. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@norahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.